28 years ago, 4 nuns and a young orphan girl vanished from a remote convent in Elden Hollow without a trace. No cries for help, no witnesses, just a single note. We left for her safety. Authorities suspected a cover-up. The town buried the truth, and the world moved on. Until one woman moved into a house built over that forgotten chapel, and her 6-year-old daughter whispered, "There's someone calling me from under the ground." Elden Hollow welcomed Lisa Moreno with the unpredictable chill of an autumn morning. The air was thin and damp, as if the early mist could never quite fully dissipate. Wooden rooftops peeked through the silvery fog, narrow lanes wound through the barren hills, and somewhere the faint tolling of a church bell echoed like a forgotten memory. The moving truck had just left, leaving a few unpacked boxes in the yard. Lisa stood silently on the porch for a moment, arms crossed, her gaze fixed on the backyard, the site of a former chapel. She didn't know why she'd chosen this place, only that something compelled her. A nameless feeling, much like the intuition that had saved her from many dead ends in journalism. Emily ran around between the boxes, happily playing with the little wagon Lisa had given her for her last birthday. She was only 6 years old, with wide, round eyes and a bright laugh. Still a child who loved life, even though she'd been quieter lately, especially after her father's death in an accident. "Don't run into the backyard, honey, I haven't checked it yet," Lisa called after her. "That place is weird, Mommy." Emily stopped abruptly. She didn't turn around, just stared at the dilapidated fence at the far end of the garden. "I keep hearing sounds coming from underground, like people whispering, really quietly. Not clear, but sad." A chill ran down Lisa's spine. She hurried over, took her daughter's hand, and crouched down. "It's probably just the wind, honey. There are a lot of trees here. Sounds can be strange." Emily nodded slightly, but still didn't take her eyes off the old corner of the garden. Something in that look, not ordinary fear, but a primal instinct, suddenly made Lisa feel worried. That afternoon, Lisa received the official land transfer documents from the local office. She sat at the kitchen table, opening each page, making notes, and taking sips of cold coffee. Most of the paperwork was clear, but there was one old document, the corner slightly burned, with a faint line almost impossible to read. "Old chapel site. Caution. No access after 1993. Lisa frowned. She turned the page and came across a name that was mentioned repeatedly in the records related to the land, Walter Keene. The name made her pause, not because it was familiar, but because it felt like something quietly lay hidden beneath it, like a stone covered in moss, small but heavy. The next day, Lisa took Emily for a walk around town. She wanted her daughter to get acquainted with the new environment and take the opportunity to chat with some of the locals. But there was a common thread that Lisa quickly recognized. Anyone who heard mention of the land behind her house would fall silent, avoid the subject, or seem embarrassed. That plot? No one's mentioned it in a while. It used to be some kind of monastery. Go ahead and fix it up, but it's best not to dig too deep. Oh, Mr. Keene used to live there. He's disappeared now, and no one remembers much. The answers were always abrupt, disjointed, and absolutely no one mentioned the year 1993. That afternoon, while clearing weeds near the old brick wall in the backyard, Lisa accidentally stepped on something hard. She bent down, brushed away the dirt and roots, and gently pulled it up. It was a small wooden cross, rotten at the base, broken diagonally at the end. The top of the cross was charred as if it had been partially burned, but between the two pieces of wood, a faint Latin inscription was still visible. Lux in tenebris, light in darkness. Lisa stood silently for a moment, feeling the air around her thicken. She picked up the cross, wiped it off with her sleeve, and looked towards the window where Emily was sitting drawing. The little girl was looking out too and just silent. That night, as Lisa prepared for bed, she peeked into Emily's room. The little girl was fast asleep, curled up in her blanket, her familiar stuffed bear held tightly to her chest. Lisa bent down, kissed her daughter's forehead gently, and turned to leave. "Mommy." A whisper came from behind. Lisa turned back, seeing Emily still with her eyes closed, her lips moving as if talking in her sleep. "Mommy, I can still hear people talking." Lisa's heart clenched. She went over and gently shook the little girl. "Honey, you're just dreaming." Emily opened her eyes, looking at her mother intently, not crying but her face strangely frightened. "It's not a dream, Mommy." Lisa hugged her daughter close, trying to keep her voice calm, even though a chill had run down her spine. Outside the window, the wind rustled through the trees. A faint murmuring sound arose, like someone whispering something, too far away to hear clearly, but close enough to be impossible to ignore. Elden Hollow was so small that the church didn't need bells for people to know when it was time for Mass. Just seeing smoke from the parsonage chimney and a few wooden benches outside the yard cleaned up was enough to know. Father Anton was ready to welcome someone to confess their sins, or simply to be silent with him. Lisa went to the church on a Thursday morning. The sky was gray, the wind was cold, and no one was out except for the old woman selling cakes near the market. She wore a long gray coat, clutching a thin folder of documents. Her eyes were slightly swollen from a sleepless night. Emily's voice still echoed in her head. "Mommy, there are people calling me from underground." The parsonage door opened slightly when she knocked gently. "Hello?" Lisa called out, her eyes scanning the empty room. "Come in," a hoarse male voice came from inside. Lisa stepped inside. The room was small, with a warm smell of old wood. On the table, a teapot steamed. Behind it, a thin, gray-haired man was trying to stuff pieces of paper into an old wooden box. Lisa said softly, "Father Anton?" "That's me." He didn't turn around. "Do you need to confess?" Lisa hesitated. "I need an answer." "If you're willing to answer." That's when he turned around. His eyes were deep, wrinkled, and looked tired. But what made Lisa pause was the look of sadness that was beyond sadness. The look of someone who had given up hope, only keeping memories so as not to disappear completely. "What brings you here?" Father Anton poured tea. His hand trembled slightly. Lisa noticed, but said nothing. "My daughter says there are voices in the garden behind the house. I don't really believe it, but when I researched the land records, I learned that my house used to be on the site of an old chapel, and a name appears many times, Walter Keene." Crash. The teacup fell to the floor, shattering into two pieces, hot water splashing all over the base of the table. Father Anton didn't rush to pick it up. He just closed his eyes for a moment, then sighed, a very long sigh. Lisa said nothing. She was patient, as if waiting for a witness to decide whether or not to tear open painful memories again. After a moment, he quietly bent down to pick up the broken pieces, his hand still shaking. "Are you a journalist?" he asked without looking up. "I used to be," Lisa replied. "Now, I'm just a mother who needs to understand what's happening around her child." On the wall of his room hung a black and white photo in a simple wooden frame. 4 young nuns stood next to each other in front of a gray stone background, each with a different expression. One smiling slightly, one pensive, one as if trying to hide something. Lisa realized that Father Anton's gaze didn't leave the third person, a woman with eyes that looked a lot like his. "My sister, Maria," he said. "She was the first person in my family to become a nun. From a young age, she believed in good. She believed that good people needed to keep their promises, and that if there was a place that was truly safe, it would surely be God's house." Lisa didn't interrupt. She let him tell his story. Sometimes, painful pieces only appear when they are listened to in the right way. "They didn't disappear," he said softly. "They were taken by someone." Lisa looked up, catching a strangely sharp look in the old man's eyes. The police thought they ran away. The villagers thought they created some kind of hoax. But I live here. I know my sister. Maria would never let an orphan disappear under her care unless... He paused. Lisa asked softly, "Unless what?" "Unless she was forced to be silent." The air in the room noticeably cooled. Then Lisa continued to ask, "Who is Walter Keene, Father?" Father Anton squeezed his hand slightly, looking out the window, where the early light still couldn't penetrate the thick fog. Walter was a boy no one wanted to raise, no one wanted to touch. Skinny as a stick, his eyes were always wet, but never shed tears. I used to see him at the chapel when he was about 10 years old. He didn't talk to anyone. But my sister, Sister Maria, always paid attention to those who were forgotten. I think she was the only one who ever treated Walter like a real child. Lisa felt her heart twinge, not because of pity for Walter, but because she understood that injured people who are not healed can sometimes become the source of injury to others. "You know," he said, almost whispering, "I'm the last person who remembers who they really were. Not the names in the records, not the meaningless conclusions of the police, but the people who used to pray with the belief that if they were hurt, someone would come." Lisa said nothing. She just looked at him. And in that moment, two people, one old and one young, a priest and a journalist, seemed to share something that couldn't be named. A sadness of those who had once believed in justice, but were then left in silence. She stood up, gently placing her hand on the cover of the old Bible. "I will find them," she said. He looked at her for a long time, then nodded slightly. There are names that when read, we don't feel anything at all. But there are names that, even if they are just a simple string of letters, still carry the smell of old dust, darkness, and things no one wants to remember. Walter Keene was such a name. Lisa returned from the church with an indescribable feeling. She knew she needed to solve this mystery, a mystery that the whole town didn't dare mention. She opened her laptop, logging into the public records storage system, an old habit from her days as an investigative journalist. The keyword Walter Keene only returned a few scraps of information: land transfers, temporary residence registrations, a few routine medical checkups, no occupation, no relatives, no images. Everything was so clean that it was unusual. Lisa narrowed her eyes, starting to search for records related to St. Anselm's Monastery before 1993, the time it was closed. In a blurred, almost forgotten file, she found a noteworthy piece of paper: List of trainee monks, period 1965 to 1971. At the end of the list, in a scrawling but clear handwriting, Walter Keene, transferred after an unverified incident, 1971. Lisa paused for a long time at that line. Unverified incident. No description, no disciplinary report, no one clarified. There were only two possibilities. Either someone intentionally covered it up, or no one wanted to remember. She recorded all the information, printed a copy, and then turned to an old acquaintance, Thomas Greaves, an old builder who had worked near the monastery land for many years. He was a man of few words, living alone on the edge of town, but was famous for having a very good memory of things no one wanted to touch. Walter Keene? Thomas snorted, exhaling pipe smoke out the window. "Yeah, I remember that guy. Not much, though. Worked with him around 1995 when he had just bought the monastery land." Lisa sat still, not taking notes, just listening. "He hired me to dig the foundations, said it was to fix the ground and make a garden. But it was strange. My grandson and I spent almost a week digging more than 5 meters deep, but he didn't let anything be built on it." "Did you ask?" "He didn't want to talk about it, so I didn't ask either. I only know that every time I accidentally mentioned the hole, his eyes would turn red like someone had splashed wine in his face. He didn't threaten, didn't shout, just looked. But it was a look that made people not want to come back." Lisa clenched her hand. "Are you going to dig up that hole?" Thomas asked, his voice half warning, half pity. Lisa didn't answer. She thanked him and left. Something was growing in her heart, not just curiosity, but a strange kind of responsibility. As if no one was brave enough to lift the dusty veil of the past, those buried within would never see the light. That night, when Emily was asleep, Lisa spread out the old maps of the chapel on the table. She used a desk lamp, a magnifying glass, and examined every line of the foundation plans. The main map from 1970 clearly stated air shaft, escape route, East Chapel area. But in the 1995 revised version, submitted by Walter Keane himself to apply for permission to build a landscape garden, the air shaft section was crossed out, replaced with an unclear symbol. Lisa took a ruler, measured the distance, estimated, and identified a location that could be the old vent, if it hadn't been completely filled. A chill ran down her spine. She looked at the clock, 11:17 p.m. Flashlight, jacket, small knife. She carefully prepared and stepped out into the backyard. The moonlight was covered by clouds. There was only the chirping of insects and the wind blowing through the dry branches like someone groaning. Lisa crouched down close to the ground, following the traces she had seen in the diagram. A clump of rotten grass, a misaligned rock, and finally, a small, deep, square hole, just big enough for a hand to fit through. She brushed away fallen leaves, pulling up a rusty iron mesh. It was a vent, almost certainly. Lisa put her ear down. At first, there was silence, then a very faint sound, like someone dragging something far below. She held her breath. The sound came again. Then another sound, lower, weaker, and clearly a human voice, a woman's voice. "Please forgive me." Lisa jumped back, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe it was an illusion. But the voice repeated, this time sounding like someone singing a lullaby, disjointed, murky, but full of despair. She stood motionless for a long time, then slowly bent down, placing her hand on the vent. The voice wasn't calling her. It was calling anyone who was brave enough to listen. Back in the house, Lisa opened the recorder, rewinding the recording she had made that night. Although the quality was poor with heavy static, a broken sentence was still clearly audible. "Please forgive me. I know I was wrong." Lisa didn't know who that person was, but that voice, trembling, stifled, and fading with the years, had torn her fear into pity. Not because she was a journalist, not because she needed the truth, but because she couldn't ignore that call, just as she would never ignore it if one day Emily was left in the dark. Lisa didn't sleep all night, not out of fear, but because something in the voice that echoed from underground clung to her, like a rope pulling her mind back to something that Elden Hollow had long tried to forget. That voice didn't sound like a scream. It was small, trembling, like someone who had given up hope of being heard, but still whispered because there was no other way to exist. The next morning, it was drizzling. Lisa drove to the church again. Father Anton was dusting the statue of Saint Jerome when she appeared. She didn't beat around the bush, didn't say many greetings. For the first time, Lisa went straight to the point, like someone no longer willing to wait any longer. "You once said that they didn't leave. They were taken, right?" She paused, then continued, her voice not loud, but certain. "Last night, I heard them." Father Anton slowly turned around. His eyes were no longer surprised. There was only a deeper sadness, as if he knew this day would come, just not sure when. "Are they still calling?" he asked, without a hint of doubt. Lisa nodded. "Under an air shaft, very small, very old. There are two voices, one younger and one older. They are reading the scriptures, praying." No one said anything for a few seconds. No bell, no wind. Only the truth that had just been spoken, like a long-lost key finally finding the right lock. Father Anton led Lisa into a small storage room behind the parsonage. The dim yellow light was not enough to clearly illuminate the cluttered items. He reached for an old wooden shelf, pulling out a brown leather drawing tube that had cracked. "This is the original design of St. Anselm's Monastery," he said, respectfully pulling out the drawing. "This has never been published outside the church. I kept it because I thought I might need it one day." Lisa spread the drawing on the table. The ink had smeared in a few places, but the layout was still clear. The main chapel building, the kitchen, the library, and, Lisa pointed, "Cold storage?" "Yes," Anton replied. "Used to store goods, agricultural products, precious books in the summer. But no one has been allowed inside since 1970, an incident no one wants to mention." Lisa suddenly remembered the line in the old record. Transferred after an unverified incident, 1971. Walter Keene had left the monastery that same year. She looked at Father Anton, who nodded. Walter used to wander around that basement area. No one knew what he was doing, but my sister, Maria, used to say he was very afraid of the light. Once she found him sitting quietly in the dark for hours, not moving. Lisa asked softly, "And the day the nuns disappeared?" Anton's eyes looked straight at the statue of Christ crucified on the wall. He answered, his voice choked. "That night, the chapel bell rang at 3 a.m., even though no one rang it. Even though no one had the right to enter the bell tower after 10 p.m. As night fell, Lisa returned to the backyard, this time not alone. Father Anton walked beside her, carrying a flashlight, a small cross, and an old Bible. He didn't say much, just whispered a few disjointed prayers, like someone about to enter the land of souls. They arrived at the exact location Lisa had heard the voices. She removed the leaves, rotten bricks, and brushed away the dirt. The vent was still there, and this time, she brought a professional recorder. "Do you really want to do this?" Father Anton asked. Lisa nodded. "My daughter heard it. She's only 6 years old and didn't turn away, so I have no reason to back down." They turned on the recorder, placing it close to the vent, then listened in silence. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. There was nothing but the wind and the steady breathing of two elderly people who had lived too long with silence. Then, a small sound, like fingernails scratching lightly on stone. Lisa held her breath. She put her ear close, almost touching the ground. A prayer began to rise, weakly, as if through a thick stone wall. Each Latin word sparse. Dominus vobiscum. She turned to Father Anton. He was crying. Then, a second voice rose, younger, thinner, also reading the scriptures but out of rhythm, as if never having learned the complete prayer. A child was reading the scriptures with someone underground. Lisa burst into tears, not because of fear, not because of shock, but because she knew they weren't ghosts, not shadows, not vague spirits like in folk tales. They were people, human beings, alive, praying, waiting for someone to listen. She took the recorder, turned it off, and stood up. Her legs trembled from the cold, or from what had just happened. Father Anton stood beside her, his hand clutching the cross, his lips trembling. "I will take this recording to the police station," Lisa said decisively. Anton slowly nodded. "For the first time in 28 years, I don't feel like I'm just a crazy old man holding on to an old dream." Lisa put her hand on his shoulder. "It's not a dream. We just heard the truth." Lisa sat in front of the computer for 2 hours, her hand still on the mouse but not yet clicking. Send. The recording was still there, lasting almost 3 minutes, with blurry sound quality but enough to make the listener's heart contract. Two voices praying, one old, one young, one definite, one hesitant. And the silence surrounding them, as thick as a layer of concrete, was what made the recording so haunting. She had edited, filtered out noise, and added Latin subtitles. Nothing sensational, without adding any predictions. There was only one description. Recording from the vent in the abandoned garden of the St. Anselm Monastery, Elden Hollow, October 24, 2021. Sent to those who still believe that the truth does not die. Lisa clicked Post on the old investigation forum, where she used to be an active member during her journalism days. A small community, few people, but mostly people who did not accept what was shaped by mainstream journalism. She sat silently, watching the post appear on the homepage. Then she turned off the computer. In less than 2 hours, her phone rang continuously. Comments, messages, emails. A storm of information crashed in. Fake. Really? I've heard legends about that chapel. I live in Elden Hollow. Confirm the location is real. Then, among the hundreds of meaningless messages, there was one that stood out, sent from an anonymous account, no real name. I know the story. I saw him dig. I think he hid something under that very place. Lisa typed a reply. Is he Walter Keane? No response. Less than 10 minutes later, another message appeared. This time an email with an unidentifiable source address. Don't dig too deep. You'll regret it if you continue. You have a child, right? Lisa didn't feel afraid. She felt angry. She had received dozens of threats when she was pursuing financial scandals. But this was about her daughter. It was no longer a professional battle. This was the line between a mother and a truth seeker. That afternoon, Emily had a high fever. Lisa took her daughter to the small clinic in town. The doctor said it was due to changes in the weather, due to the body reacting to the new environment. In the waiting room, Lisa sat next to Emily, who was dozing off. Looking at her flushed face, sweating, her lips occasionally moving in a daze, she felt a voice inside her shatter. If my child is hurt because of me, what does justice mean? She squeezed Emily's small hand in hers. Trembling, she wanted to give up. There really was a time, in that moment, when she just wanted to delete the post, remove the recording, and continue living as if there were no voices whispering underground. But then, Emily opened her eyes. I'm okay, Mommy, she said softly. Lisa almost burst into tears. That evening, Lisa walked into the Elden Hollow police station, carrying a copy of the recording and a map of the old chapel foundation. She stood before the chief inspector, her voice resolute. Someone is being held down there. I don't know who they are, but I believe they are not dead. And I need you to check that area, immediately. The young policeman flipped through the file she handed over, listening to the tape. His face changed when he heard the phrase, Dominus vobiscum, rise from the machine. Lisa didn't need any more proof. The silence at this time was consent. The next morning, the land behind Lisa's house was temporarily cordoned off. No press, no noise, just 3 police officers, a town building engineer, and Lisa standing watching the grass being overturned one by one. When the hand drill drilled down close to the vent, the ground began to vibrate slightly. One of the police officers shouted, "There's a void!" They continued to break the thin layer of concrete below. The smell of mold rose immediately, pungent, suffocating, like someone had just opened a door that had been sealed for decades. Lisa stepped back. She trembled, but didn't back down. A lamp was lowered into the hole. The light swept around, illuminating the stone wall inside, mottled, jagged, then shone down into a corner of dark space. And then, a scream erupted. Not from the police, not from Lisa, but from underground. That scream, like a person last left in the darkness, seeing the light shining on their face for the first time. Lisa knelt next to the edge of the hole, tears flowing endlessly. She didn't know who was below. She didn't know how they survived, but she knew one thing more clearly than ever. When a forgotten person calls out their name in despair, the least we can do is listen and answer. She had answered, and they had heard. The smell of earth mixed with dried blood was the first thing that entered Lisa's nose as she approached the edge of the pit. Below, floodlights swept constantly, cutting through the hazy columns of dust rising from the bottom. No one spoke loudly. No one rushed. All movements were slow, as if everyone understood that they were touching something that was not only a crime, but a living relic of pain that had never been acknowledged. A long rope was lowered into the ground. Rescuers wore protective clothing, gas masks, one by one slowly climbing down. The team leader only said briefly, "The air below is heavy, moldy, sealed tight. Don't stay down there too long." Lisa stood outside, clutching a small piece of wood, the broken piece of cross she had picked up from this land. She was no longer a journalist at this time, no longer an investigator. She was just someone waiting for life, or truth, to emerge from the abyss. About 10 minutes later, a signal was transmitted up from below. The team leader shouted, "There are people!" Still breathing. Everyone cheered, then fell silent. 2 rescue workers pulled up a stretcher. On it was a thin body, almost entirely white hair, eyes closed, lips cracked. A police officer standing nearby whispered to Lisa, "We think it's Sister Maria." Lisa just nodded slightly, unable to say anything. Father Anton, standing a few steps away, knelt down, put his hands together, muttering prayers. His tears flowed down each wrinkle, dripping onto his hands like drops of apology to his sister who had disappeared from the world for 28 years. 2 other personnel climbed up afterwards. The 3rd person was supported by their hands, not a stretcher. Not because she was lighter, but because she didn't want to lie down. That girl, or woman, clung to their hands like a child who didn't want to get lost from her mother in a crowded supermarket. Her eyes were blurred, not looking anywhere, her skin as pale as if she had never touched sunlight. She huddled, sitting on the ground when she reached the mouth of the pit. Her whole body trembled. Lisa approached. The rescue team stopped her with a shake of their head. She is unstable. It seems she doesn't know where she is. But when Lisa slowed down, saying nothing, not trying to touch, that girl looked up. Her eyes were blurred but piercing. A vast emptiness in those pupils made Lisa feel like she was falling into a deep pit of lost time. A whisper came out, hoarse but still clear each word. "You have a daughter, right?" Lisa froze. She didn't know why that woman knew. She didn't know why she felt afraid when she heard that question. Not afraid for herself, but afraid of what was about to be said. The woman continued, her voice like falling ashes. "Don't let her stay in the dark like I did." Lisa burst into tears. Not crying like when in pain, but the kind of crying that couldn't be stopped. As if all the layers of being a mother, an adult, a rational person fell away at the same time. She sat down next to that woman, not touching, just sitting. One hand placed on the cold ground, one hand clutching the broken piece of cross. "Are you Anna, right?" she asked softly. The woman didn't answer, but her eyes began to tear. One of the medical staff bent down. "We will take her and Sister Maria to the town hospital. We will need DNA confirmation. But there are 2 more people." Lisa understood. She stood up, turning away. Behind her, the prayer sounded again, small, weak, but this time, no longer desperate, but the sound of survival. The police completely sealed off the scene. When the bodies of the 2 remaining nuns were found, rolled up in blankets, their hands still intertwined as if praying, Lisa wasn't there. She was with Emily. She sat next to her little girl's bed, holding her hand. Emily's fever had subsided, but she was still tired. When she opened her eyes, the little girl asked, "Mommy, did she come out yet? The person who always calls me?" Lisa nodded, her eyes red. "Yes. Mommy thinks she will live." Emily smiled, closing her eyes again. That night, Lisa didn't write anything. No notes. Didn't turn on the computer. She just stared at the ceiling, her hand still squeezing her wrist lightly, where Anna Porter's eyes had stopped. In those eyes, Lisa saw herself. Not a savior, but a survivor. She once thought she was strong. Once thought suffering made her stronger. But now she understood there are people who don't need to be strong. They just need to live. And if they can't live, then at least They need to be remembered. Father Anton came to see her the next day, bringing an old photo. In the photo were 4 nuns standing in front of the chapel, and a little girl, wearing a white dress, standing slightly behind the nuns' dresses, her eyes looking straight at the camera as if looking for someone. "Anna," he said, "the first day at the monastery, we didn't think we would ever see her again." Lisa took the photo, placing it next to Emily's photo on her desk. She didn't know what to write in the upcoming article, didn't know where to start or who to name first, but she knew a dark chapter had closed, and the light, albeit late, had truly stepped down into the ground. Anna's hospital room was always closed. The light was just enough not to hurt her eyes, and the curtains were always half drawn, as if what was outside was still too strange to enter. Anna sat by the window, her eyes facing the gray sky like a blanket that no one bothered to fold. She didn't say much, didn't ask anything either. The doctors said she was still functionally alert, but the trauma that lasted for nearly 3 decades had tightly wrapped her soul in the cold cocoon of survival habits. Lisa came every day, not bothering, not asking much, just sitting there, reading a book or peeling an apple. She knew Anna needed time and, more than anything, needed someone who wouldn't leave halfway. One morning, the doctor announced, "She hasn't eaten anything since yesterday. Dehydration may return." Lisa thought for a moment, then went home to pick up Emily. Emily walked into the hospital room as if it was a place she used to know. Without fear, without hesitation, she pulled a chair down next to the bed, looked at Anna for a long time, then asked, "Do you know how to draw?" Anna didn't answer. Emily took a small notebook out of her backpack, handing it to her. "I usually draw when I'm sad. It doesn't need to be pretty. You draw what you want." Anna received it. Her hands trembled slightly when she touched the page. The pencil slipped in her hand as if it had been too long since anything needed to be recorded. But then, very slowly, she began to draw. A circle, a tree, a window without light. Lisa held her breath, watching from afar, not because of the drawing, but because Anna was reviving. Anna stopped halfway when drawing the window without light. She looked at Emily, who was happily coloring the sky, tilted her head slightly. Then, almost unconsciously, she said, "A long time ago I used to draw too. Every evening, before praying, the sisters gave me 10 minutes to record the most beautiful thing of the day. Sometimes I just drew a piece of toast." Lisa was silent. A 37-year-old woman, still holding memories of small pieces of bread. Not because it was delicious, but because it was the rare thing that still had a normal shape in a world full of threats. Anna continued, her voice quieter. "But one day, the sister didn't let me draw anymore. She said that if I was good, I wouldn't need paper and pencils because God would remember for me." Lisa exhaled slowly, feeling the sadness not from the voice, but from the unconscious self-censorship, as if wanting to live for yourself was also something that needed permission. Emily gently placed her hand on Anna's shoulder, saying nothing. She just sat still, her eyes attentive and gentle. That afternoon, when it was just the two of them, Anna spoke. Her voice was as hoarse as sand, but clear enough for Lisa to hear each word. "We prayed for a long time, many times. But no one answered. No one heard, even though I called very loudly, then very softly." Lisa didn't interrupt. She just looked, and in Anna's eyes, she saw herself, saw the lonely nights after her husband died, saw the times no one believed her when investigating wrongdoing, saw the times she tried to hold on to a voice that the world didn't want to listen to. "No one answered," Anna repeated, her voice slower. "Now there is," Lisa said softly. "Now you're not forgotten anymore." A few days later, Father Anton came. He didn't go to Anna's room. He sat in the special care room next to Sister Maria's bed, his sister. Maria was still on a ventilator, her body so thin that it was impossible to distinguish the lines between bone and skin, but the doctor said she could hear. Anton opened the letter. not from him, but from Maria herself, written by hand a few days after she was given water and could move a little. Anton, if you are reading this letter, it means you have not forgotten me. Thank you for not believing they left, for keeping our memories. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. Anton folded the letter, his eyes closed. He whispered a short prayer, not to atone for sins, but to maintain faith, because he himself once thought he was wrong, until Lisa appeared. In the meantime, the police continued to investigate the basement underground. Technicians discovered forged documents. The monastery's registers were rewritten by hand with traces of Walter's pen. A hard drive was found in his attic room containing recordings. A man's voice, monotonous, repeating, "No one wants you. No one chooses you. They abandoned you. I am all you have." The threatening voice, impregnated with poison, rang out amidst the whistling wind, like a brainwashing program programmed manually in the dark. When Walter was arrested, he didn't resist. His eyes were dry, not trembling, not speaking. His face was like a stone statue, something that had been carved by years of living quietly, separated, and nursing resentment. Lisa looked at him through the glass of the detention room. She didn't see a monster, nor did she see a victim. She only saw a person who chose to nurture pain in the wrong way, and then took it out to create a prison for others. That afternoon, Lisa returned to Anna's room. She brought a photo of Anna's first day at the monastery, from Father Anton. She placed the photo on the table, next to Emily's sketchbook. Anna looked at the photo for a long time. Lisa asked softly, "What do you want most now?" Anna was silent. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then she picked up the pencil, writing slowly at the end of the notebook page, "I want to be remembered as someone who lived." Lisa bowed her head. Not because of pain, but because she knew she had just read the most concise sentence about the meaning of existence. Not great, no need for glory, just to be remembered, not as a victim, but as a human being. Afterwards, Father Anton gave Lisa another small envelope. Inside was an old piece of paper, written in crooked, childish handwriting. "I don't know who will read this, but if anyone does, tell everyone that I don't want to die. I just want someone to believe that I'm not trash." "We found this in the secondary bedroom of the basement," Anton said, his eyes red. "I believe it's from Anna, when she was very young." Lisa clutched the envelope tightly. Her heart felt like hundreds of tiny pieces of glass were spinning in her chest. She had written lines very similar to that, never sent, in an old notebook after her husband's death. She thought, "We didn't just save one person. We just found ourselves from the bottom of someone else's abyss." And Lisa understood. The article she was about to write wouldn't begin with crime or rescue. It would begin with a name, Anna Porter, a child who was once swallowed into darkness and had returned, to remind us that the light never forgets those who patiently wait for it. The Elden Hollow County Court had never been as crowded as it was that morning. The misty glass outside was covered with newspaper to prevent the press from taking pictures. Inside, the wooden benches, familiar with land disputes, administrative violations, were now full of people. No one spoke loudly. No one breathed heavily. Each person came with a different purpose, but all wanted to witness something ending. Lisa sat in the second row. Her hand held the small hand of Emily lightly. The little girl sat quietly like a young leaf in winter. Next to Lisa was Father Anton, his suit old, his tie loose, but his back as straight as when he performed Mass every morning. Above the dock, Walter Keene was brought in. He wasn't in shackles, not handcuffed. He just silently walked in, head bowed, eyes not looking at anyone. The pale gray prisoner's clothes made him as indistinct as a faded stain. But it was precisely the way he was absolutely silent that made the room so heavy that no one wanted to breathe. The judge was a middle-aged woman, her voice firm but not cold. She began by summarizing the indictment: kidnapping, detention, forging documents, physical harm, mental harm, concealing bodies, deceiving law enforcement agencies. Each charge was a slash of scissors cutting through the air, making Lisa feel like her chest was tightening with each beat. When it came to the defendant's opinion section, the defense attorney stood up, a young man, his voice sure, but his eyes full of hesitation. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Walter Keene, is now 72 years old, has a history of severe psychological abuse in childhood in Catholic orphanages. We ask the court to consider a corrective and humane sentence, with medical supervision." The entire room shook with silence. No one said anything, but Lisa could clearly feel the undercurrent of anger running through the air like electricity. The plaintiff's side was represented by the public prosecutor's office, and a row of seats with 3 people summoned as witnesses: Sister Maria, Father Anton, and Anna Porter. Sister Maria could not attend court due to her poor health, but had submitted a written statement. Father Anton refused to testify. He just wanted to sit below and witness. Anna was the only one who stood up. She wore a simple white dress, her hair neatly cut, no makeup, not trying to look normal, just herself, with a slightly trembling voice, slightly clenched hands, and eyes that no longer evaded. "My name is Anna Porter," she said, her voice clearer every day in the hospital. "I lived for 28 years in the dark. No light, no calendar, no seasons. No one's words except a voice, teaching me to be afraid. I don't know how this world works, but I know one thing. I am still alive, and I want not to be seen as evidence." She bowed her head, ending her testimony with a sentence that Lisa would later write verbatim in the article. "Please don't look at me as part of the case. I am a person, a human being who has waited to be called by name for nearly 3 decades. After the final arguments, the forensic doctor was invited to speak. He confirmed that Walter was completely mentally alert, did not suffer from schizophrenia, no paranoia, not incapable of cognitive behavior. He is an isolated person with distorted thoughts, but alert. That is why he built the basement with a system, planned carefully, concealed all traces. Lisa closed her eyes. She didn't expect Walter to cry, nor did she expect him to apologize. But his silence, expressionless, unresisting, without a word, made her feel colder than anything else. The verdict was announced at 3:17 p.m. Life imprisonment, no parole, no conditions, no leniency due to age. When the verdict rang out, Walter did not raise his head. Lisa didn't either. She stood up, bowed deeply, then turned and left the courtroom. No photos, no shaking hands, not looking towards the man for whom she was partly the cause of his trial. Emily ran over, taking her hand. Lisa bent down, kissing her little girl's hair lightly. That hand, small, warm, innocent, was exactly like Anna's hand the first day she came out into the light. And Lisa understood. She wasn't celebrating. She just felt relieved. On the way home, the weather changed to rain. The first seasonal drops fell evenly on the car windows. Emily asked, "Mommy, if Anna hadn't been rescued, where would she be now?" Lisa was silent for a moment. Then she replied, "Maybe she would still be there, but the difference is not calling anymore." "Why?" Lisa squeezed her daughter's hand lightly. "Because everyone gets exhausted at some point, honey. If no one listens, people will stop. Forever." The sky was unexpectedly clear that morning, as if the weather also knew it needed to be quiet, not disturbed, to make way for memory. Lisa stood in the middle of the land where St. Anselm's Chapel once stood. There was nothing left but the old brick foundation, a few remaining stones, a few broken iron columns erected temporarily to mark the old boundaries. But the feeling that she was standing in a sacred place was unmistakable, not because of divinity, but because of humanity. Father Anton wore a simple liturgical robe, holding a small wooden box with candles. His face was much thinner, but his eyes were brighter than Lisa had ever seen. He knelt down, carefully placing 5 candles in an arc on the stone ground, then lighting each one. He read the names, each word, slowly, without trembling, like calling back 5 parts of the soul that had been buried. Sister Helena, Sister Juliana, Sister Teresa, Sister Maria, Anna Porter. No one applauded, no sniffles, just a deep and beautiful silence, like sadness that had been recognized with presence. More townspeople came than Lisa imagined. Old, young faces, some who had avoided, had gossiped, had been silent, now stood next to each other. No one said anything about the past, but the way they looked at Father Anton was different. An old woman approached Lisa, gently taking her hand. "We were wrong to think they ran away. Thank you for not being silent as we once were." Lisa just nodded slightly. Sister Maria was pushed to the middle of the ceremony, sitting in a wheelchair, wearing a faded nun's scarf. When she saw Lisa, she squeezed her hand lightly, her eyes wet, but without tears. No need to say anything. Gratitude was clear in the way she held, kept, and released her hand, as if she had finally given back something she had held for too long, guilt that didn't belong to her, but she had embraced it completely. It was Anna's turn to step up. She wore a simple white dress, her hair tied low, holding an old Bible in her hand. Her eyes were still sensitive to light, so Father Anton had prepared a canopy of thin fabric above her standing place. Anna took a deep breath. Then, in a slender but decisive voice, she read, "Those who are forgotten will be called by their names, and in God's hands they are no longer shadows. Because the truth does not disappear, just waits for someone patient enough to listen." Each sentence she read was a breath of the entire crowd. No one remembered where that scripture was. It could be real, it could be written, but it didn't matter, because that sentence was a testimony, not in court, but before life. After Anna finished reading, the entire space seemed to be held still for a few absolutely silent seconds. A middle-aged woman in the crowd suddenly took out a purple ribbon, tying it around her arm. Others followed suit. No one spoke to initiate, but one by one people began to wear purple ribbons on their cuffs, handbags, even pinned to mourning scarves. In the old days, the sisters used to wear purple ribbons during the requiem, Father Anton said softly to Lisa, a symbol of the belief that the dead are only sleeping and will be awakened by remembrance. Lisa bowed her head. Today, no one erected a magnificent ceremony, but that spontaneous action was the most beautiful ritual, because it was not planned, but came from the heart. When the ceremony ended, Emily silently stepped forward. In her hand was the broken wooden cross, the one Lisa had picked up from the garden on the first day. Emily sat down, her small hands digging a small patch of soil between the old bricks. A small click sounded. The little girl looked up at her mother, a little afraid. Lisa stepped forward, together with her daughter brushed away the layer of gray dust, and discovered a brick with a sunken inscription. The letters were almost completely blurred. Only a few characters remained. Tum est lucem. Lisa looked at Anton. He nodded slightly. The rest of the line is Redemptum est in lucem, which means redeemed by light. Lisa stroked the layer of dust on the brick lightly and whispered, "It's not a coincidence." She helped Emily place the broken cross next to that brick, not upright, not trying to fix it. Just let it lean towards the sun as a gesture allowing the past to rest in its original form. Not perfect, but real. Lisa looked at her daughter, then turned away, her eyes blurred. She remembered everything. The voice in the night, the old records, Anna's eyes first looking up from the ground, the threatening messages, Walter's silence, and Emily's question in the hospital. "Did you hear them, Mommy?" Now Lisa could answer. She had heard, and had answered, not only with justice, but with the patience to stay, to bring a person back from where people thought no one survived. When everyone had left, with only a few people remaining, Lisa sat down on the stone foundation, her hand placed on the brick in the middle. She didn't cry loudly. Just let the tears flow naturally like a stream of water trickling through the stone after the rain. Then she smiled. A light smile, not gloating, not proud, just relieved. She whispered as if answering someone or herself, "I was also a forgotten person, until I was called Mommy by my daughter." The last night of October, the wind blew softly through the slightly open window frame. Outside, the moon was thin as a slice of paper, spreading faint light evenly over the backyard. The place that was once a prison, now only a lawn dotted with dry leaves, with a small stone path leading to the replanted tree. Lisa sat at her desk, the desk lamp turned on just enough, and Emily was sleeping a few meters away, on the sofa curled up in a blanket. Each keystroke of hers sounded like a knock on the door of a long memory that had finally been opened. The final article, not for the court, not sent to the newspaper, not for grades or fame, just to say what needs to be said. Lisa didn't start with Walter Keene, didn't start with the charges, didn't start with details. She started with a question. If a person is imprisoned in the dark and they call out their name for 28 years, then what hurts more? Being imprisoned or no one hearing? She told about Anna, not as a victim, but as a surviving being. She described the blurred eyes the first time she saw sunlight, the trembling when she held a spoon to eat for the first time after nearly 30 years, and the determination when she read the scripture in the middle of the crowd as if that was the only way out of the soul of the little girl who had been locked up since she was 9. She wrote about Sister Maria, about the apology that didn't need to be forgiven, but made the recipient feel that she also needed to be redeemed. About Father Anton, the one who kept the memory not because he believed someone would believe him, but because he feared that one day even he would forget that he once had faith. And finally, she told about Emily, about the child who taught her, "Don't be too rational with something that doesn't have an answer yet, because the truth doesn't need to be understood immediately, it just needs to be listened to." The article title was typed by Lisa last when the screen showed the words, "Save. The people no one heard." After clicking send to the independent publishing platform, Lisa turned off the computer. No promotion, not waiting for shares. She just left the article there, like an open door, if someone lost needed to find an escape with a true story. The next morning, while making coffee, she received an email from an unidentified address. No title, just one line. "Thank you for listening for us." Lisa didn't know who wrote it. It could be another survivor. It could be the descendants of someone who had disappeared. It could just be a stranger. But it didn't matter, because that thank you was enough to confirm that the voice of truth had touched another heart. The following week, Lisa visited Anna at the rehabilitation center 10 kilometers from town. The center was small, simple, with a garden and open space. Anna was practicing riding a bicycle, a yellow bike, the auxiliary wheels still attached. The assistant stood next to her, gently supporting the handlebars when the bike swayed lightly. Lisa stood silently. A light breeze pulled her hair back. Anna turned her head, seeing Lisa, smiling very softly, like someone who had just regained her balance for the first time after a dizziness that lasted for half a lifetime. No one mentioned the old story. No need. The eyes said enough. That afternoon, Lisa and Emily returned to the garden behind the house. Emily ran around the lawn, touching each small stone, each newly fallen leaf. "What are you playing?" Lisa asked. Emily replied, without stopping, "I'm counting steps. To know the distance from our door, to the place where people used to be lost." Lisa laughed. No one taught the little girl sentences like that. But perhaps there are things children can feel with the instinct of sensitivity that has not been covered by adult reason. When Lisa sat down on the stone steps watching her daughter play, she remembered everything. Remember the first night she heard the whispering voice. Remember Anna's trembling hands. Remember the broken cross. Remember the cold ground and the first lights shining down into the dark basement. She sighed, not because of tiredness, but the final breath of a journey that had gone far enough. Lisa reopened the article draft, clicked Last Edit, and added a single line at the very end. Silence cannot kill the truth.